on this computer. Recording in progress. Okay. Uh, yeah, again, thank you. All right, first question, Shawn. Uh, First off, I guess before we get into the questions, can you introduce yourself and tell us, who you are, what you do, and the like?
Oh boy, it's pressure. So I'm Shawn Madden. I guess I'm the founder of Underdog Sports Leagues and founder of League Lab software. And in my spare time, I also do some corporate events, trivia stuff, and I wrote a book on refereeing a few years ago. So I guess that makes me an author somewhere along the way, self-published book. Everyone's doing it nowadays. So yeah, I've been an entrepreneur for probably my whole life, but I started Underdog 23-ish years ago. Started League Lab about 12 years ago. And the rest is history. I started Underdog probably about 9 months after I moved to Seattle. I lived in New York. I moved from New York to Seattle, kicked around for 9 months, rode my bike past a office that had a sign in the window that said referees wanted $15 an hour. I walked in and I said, I want to apply for that job on like a Wednesday or Thursday. I refed on that Sunday for 4 hours. And the next day, they called me and said, don't bother coming to work on Wednesday. And I said, I thought I did a pretty good job. I would think I was one of your best referees out there. And they said, no, we just went bankrupt. So I and a few other people started up Underdog out of the ashes of a company that went bankrupt from a .com deal because I believe an organization called Sporting Social Clubs of the U.S., of which Seattle was one of the 22 cities, got bought by a company called StreetZebra.com. True story. So who could have seen anything bad coming from the acquisition by StreetZebra.com with magical internet stock? But again, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have had Underdog. So I started up reffing, after the Seattle Sports Social Club went out of business, to finish out the seasons that were, in progress. And one day somebody's like, what's going to happen next season? And somebody pointed at me and said, that guy should run the league because he's a pretty good ref. And so I rode my bike down to the business office and paid $75 and got a business license and started up Seattle Sports Leagues, which turned into Underdog Sports Leagues 2 years later. And the rest is history. So there's your quick origin story.
That is super cool. Actually, I've never heard that. So
yeah, it's actually kind of crazy now that I tell it now fairly often, and that also it's actually all true.
Yeah.
And then if it wasn't for you think about, I mean, you don't need to put this on the video. You can edit it.
No, I'll edit stuff out for sure. Yeah.
But it's I've always been fascinated that about you might not get it right the first time, but you'll always get at least one more chance at it. And I was a referee in college, and I kind of had a real big flame out, and it involved a bike ride and me riding my bike and showing up late. And I had gotten promoted from middle school football in Minnesota, to just doing it during college to pick up spare money. And I was doing these tiny, 7th and 8th grade games. And the biggest penalty was, not having your mouth guard in. I got promoted to high school and I didn't know it. So I went to the wrong field. And then they're like, no, you're at the stadium. And the stadium was 3 miles away. And I'm riding this bike and I'm riding it up and the game started. And there's thousands of people there for a high school JV game. And I'm showing up late to the game as the second referee. And I just don't know how to ref. And And so I've always found it funny that like that bike, and I remember that bike ride just being terrible and riding my bike home and just feeling like an absolute, loser. And I think a lot of people have that kind of story where it's like, okay, that's where the story could end. But it's ironic that I was riding my bike in Seattle 4 or 5 years later, and it was that second bike ride where I went past that sign, and I hadn't really refed since then. By the way, I never got invited back to ref. So shockingly, I never got put on the schedule ever again because I showed up 15 minutes late to a game on my bike and refed terribly because I was out of my league and I had no one ever taught me how to ref. They just gave me a rule book and said, read the rule book. And so there's that pang in your stomach of like refereeing $15 an hour when I'm riding my bike past the place in Seattle. And it's like, do I want to go back to that failure? And that's kind of, I think a lot of people I've talked to, I've always wanted to start my own business as an entrepreneur. I was selling, I would wash cars door to door when I was 10 years old. They'd have the gift wrap contests in school. I don't know if you had that, if you're younger than I am.
Oh yeah, we did.
And I would always be like number one or number two. And my friend would always be number one because his dad would rig it and his dad would buy all and then so I'd go over his house and we'd be selling gift wrap 6 months after the thing was over because his dad
had
flooded the system so he could he could win a portable TV or something like that.
That's funny.
But I was always like an entrepreneur, right? I always wanted to I worked in a baseball card store when I was 13 years old as like a store manager, and I always loved business and I always loved stocks and I always loved entrepreneurship and kind of cool business stories. But I just I had to get literally like hit over the head multiple times for me to realize that I had the opportunity to start Underdog, and I had to have like a series of events. But the events started with me going past that sign saying refs wanted $15 an hour, and me saying, you know what, last time I did that it didn't work out so well, but for whatever reason I wanted to do it again. And that's kind of I think a lot of stories probably start like that. They don't start as like, oh my gosh, you got promoted and you did amazing. It's more like you tried something, you screwed it up, but life gives you a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth crack at it, and you kind of have to decide whether you want to take it or not. And that had nothing to do with business. It's mostly fear and taking a chance and being able to deal with kind of going back at something that probably didn't work out the first time, because most things don't work out the first time.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's your little origin story reloop there.
Yeah, that is a cool background story. Everybody's got one, and it's I've heard bits and pieces obviously from Delaney, but I've never heard the whole thing. So
that's
cool.
It's if you stop and think about it, it's kind of a crazy story.
Yeah.
But just to start it, let alone the idea that it's survived over 20 years, and then also survived during COVID, which is also like literally the worst possible thing that could have happened to our business. I mean, I've been through 9/11. I've been through the financial crisis in 2008. I've been through, calamities and field cancellations and weather and rain and tornado, awful weather patterns. And, but COVID was the absolute worst. So, you get 19 years in, you hit your stride, and then you see something you've never seen before. That's the way business works.
Yeah. For me as a restaurant guy with that background, it's the same type of thing. That was like the worst possible thing that could happen. And seeing how many businesses folded, just because it was, something you'd never seen. Like everybody used to get together you'd get together when you were happy or sad, right? Like there was never a thing ever that said you can't be around other people, right? So it was interesting to see how how businesses reacted to that, and how people coped with it. And it's now kind of the revitalization of a lot of those businesses coming out of COVID has been just cool to kind of watch from the outside. And as a
Yeah.
student, it's been extremely interesting to look at from a teaching and a learning perspective, because it's like I mean, it just shows the adaptability of business, the people trying to figure out ways to make things survive. And like from a business savvy perspective, like that's cool and interesting to watch. And I'm sure people will study this for years and years and years down the road, just to see if something ever happens like that again. Like it's just interesting. So yeah. All right. I guess question number one. How do you, Shawn Madden, define success?
How do I define success? I mean, for me, right now, it's fairly easy. It's doing something that still gets you excited after 20 years, but also doing it with people you really respect, but also not being so tied up in things that you can't enjoy other things. And I think I'll just start rambling because that's what I do. I think work-life balance is mostly bullshit. Wait, am I allowed to curse?
I mean, sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, so work-life balance is bullshit. Like I've never seen a super successful person be like, I have to work on my balance. Like you have to be in some case. I mean, a poor analogy, I think, is when you keep having these people, these professional athletes, especially NFL players, like make colossally stupid decisions, like absolutely terrible life decisions. And you're like, what is wrong with that person? Like, what is it? Like, is that person crazy? And the answer is like, yeah, they are. Like, you have to be kind of crazy to step on an NFL field. And all these people that, play fantasy and, oh, my guy pulled his hamstring. Why isn't he playing? Why is he hurting? Like they've no idea, like literally no idea about the absolute, physical toll that a play takes on somebody, let alone a game, let alone a season, let alone a career. So I think, you have to be almost relentless and driven to be successful in most things in life. And so being able to throttle up for, hey, I'm going to bust my ass and do this project and do this thing, but then I'm going to take a couple of days off and I'm going to hang out with my daughter and coach her soccer team and go on a trip, and like, hey, there was a perfect moment, I think like last summer with Cam and with Cam Works is the scheduler, and I'm like, dude, you can have me every weekend, but this weekend here you can't have me. So like, use me. I'll train in whoever you want, but for this weekend, you don't have me. And I've heard so many stories from fellow entrepreneurs who would make a decision and they would be like, you know what? I really, really want to go on this trip or this thing. And a crazy thing would happen in their business. They'd be like, I'm still going. And they would go. And one guy said they went to Coachella. One guy said he went to Burning Man. I have every reason to stay here because my business is tenuous and things are tough and things are dicey. And obviously, the summertime for us is the craziest time of the year. And so that's, I think, a part of success. Success is being able to say, look, you'll have me sometime, but I'm being clear with you. Like, this isn't a constant fire drill. You can have me up until this point, and at this point, you don't have me. So now you can prepare, because a lot of times people, obviously fill the space. If you don't give people's deadlines, sometimes they'll just kind of, fill the space, and then all of a sudden be like, oh, wait a second, I'm not ready yet. It's like, no, I told you, you have me until this weekend, and then you don't have me. So that's part of success too, which I could never do in the beginning, right? I could never say I was basically doing everything by myself. So I was doing literally everything, but I was also a smaller situation, but I was doing Nick's job, Delaney's job, Cam's job, and then reffing every single game we played. And that's how most small businesses are started. But success is also, again, not finding that mythical balance, which doesn't exist, because most entrepreneurs I know can't stop thinking about their business and can't stop, dreaming about their business. But being able to trust great people to go along with you and also have a purpose, right? Like, for a long time, I don't think I did a good job of having a purpose. And that you'll find often, I think, successful organizations, the leader trusts people around them, doesn't try and do everything themselves, busts their ass sometimes, but knows when to pull back other times. But also there's a higher purpose. And if the higher purpose is the CEO gets rich, or we all make a lot of money, that's not a bad purpose. Higher purpose is, there's a bonus pool that some people do that, but the higher purpose of kind of taking the other side of things, like as sports gets crazy and expensive, as people kind of get more and more crazy, as politics gets crazy, as AI chatbots take over everything and robots are going to take over, it's like you just want to go back to when things were simpler and normal, and you could play football with your friends or play kickball at school when you were a kid. And if you can tap into that, I think, you could be successful. Another, idea, I think, in terms of being of success is often, finding the thing that I talked about this a little bit in Kansas City earlier in the year. A great idea for trying to have a successful business, I think, is often, instead of trying to figure out what people love, well, people love to have fun. Okay, well, what does fun mean? Fun can mean, I'm, doing paper mache puppets. Fun can mean I'm doing Dungeons and Dragons. Fun can mean I'm playing football. Fun can mean I'm collecting coins. Fun can mean I'm trading crypto. Everyone loves to have fun. Everyone loves to hang out with their friends and have fun. Sure. You can be a very successful business by finding out what people actually hate and starting there instead. And we're very lucky in that people love playing sports and having fun. People hate playing sports the normal ways that people used to be able to play sports. So people hate playing sports for city sports leagues. And the city never had a purpose for running a softball league, except that they kind of always did, and they were supposed to do it in the same way they're supposed to make sure the manhole covers are on, and make sure your meter is working on your house for your electricity. It's almost like a pragmatic, hey, we got to make sure the water works and the sewer works and electricity works, and we have a softball league and a basketball league at our community centers. It was just a thing. There's no purpose to it. There was no we want to help people who just moved to the city, meet people and have fun and make indie teams. And oftentimes they wouldn't do indie teams, which is something that Delaney, works on quite extensively on, and is very hard to do well. So most city leagues and rec leagues that are run out of community centers will be like, that's too much work. We can't do that. People, we were lucky, and I think it's to some extent, the cities have gotten better, but it's always best to start in an industry or a spot where, you can tap into something that people actually really hate, something people want or need to do, but they also hate. People want or need to get somewhere else. Transportation. It's always been a thing. There was horses, and there was Model Ts, and there was subways, then there was, scooters, then there's people need to get from point A to point B. People want to go to point A to point B to see their friends and do shit and eat lunch and have fun and drink beer and all that stuff. People hate taxi cabs. There's never a good experience when maybe if you're in New York, you hail a cab on the corner and it's a little bit easier. Like, I don't know if you've ever done it before. Like getting a taxi in Seattle was a fucking terrible experience. It was like, it's a terrible thing. Like, you call the number like 777-7777-888-8888.
363-3332 and
Yeah,
622-6500. I know them by heart.
right. Yeah.
They're terrible. Yeah.
So you want to take a cab because you're being responsible and you're going out to a bar to see your friends, or you're going out to a festival or a party, or you just don't want to drive, or there's no place to park, and you're like, hey, cool, like I want to take a cab, and it's an awful experience. And Uber was like, we can make this actually really cool. And my friend had to tell me 4 times, like when Uber first came out, he's like, you have to get this on your phone. And he told my neighbor, who's a good friend of mine, he's like, told me once, twice, 3 times. And the voice like, dude, you have to get this on your phone. It'll change the way you go on dates with your wife. It'll change the way you get around town. It'll change it. Just do it. And what they tapped into, which is what a lot of great companies tap into, is like, figure out what people hate. You know, Amazon did this very well with Prime, right? Like, the Amazon found out Amazon makes money in 2 spots. They make money on AWS, and they make money on Prime. And they found out, and it was, everyone loves Amazon because it's a subscription model now because of Prime. But Prime came about not because they wanted to be like Costco with a subscription model, but because they figured out in all their data that like people absolutely hated paying for shipping. And they could show them in charts and figures, if you pay for shipping, it's still cheaper than going to Best Buy or Circuit City, and nobody cared. Everybody hated paying for shipping. They just absolutely hated it. So they just said, hey, if you pay us $150 a year, shipping is free. And now they've got this gigantic business model of which most of the stuff they do loses money. But they've got this massive subscription base that, you know, Wall Street loves and they love, and they can use that money to, you know, work on silly stuff like drones or, you know, other goofy things, you know, like, and you know, obviously AWS is a huge part of that as well. But you know, we were lucky in that still to this day, like, running a good sports league is really hard. And so the amount of crap they made you do, you know, there'd be coaches meetings. You'd have to fax in your team roster to the Parks and Rec department. You have to go to a 2-hour coaches meeting where somebody would like ramble through the rule book. You have to like go to a store and like buy. I think you might still have to do this, by the way. I'm not saying this has gone away. We have to go to a store and you have to buy, like, each team is required to like buy, like, I think for like City of Bellevue, like each team is required to buy like 2 cases of softballs and like 1 case of like men's softballs and 1 case of lady softballs. And they'll actually switch out the softballs during the game from 11-inch to 12-inch. And like, but you have to go to the store. There's a league that's our competition in Portland, and they make you go to a store and buy your own flag belts. So are they really our competition? Because people like, so certain people will do that, but most people hate that. They hate dealing with a government agency that's running a league because they feel like they have to, and they've done it for 50 years. They don't care about the quality of their umpires. They don't care about making you jump through hoops and giving you crappy customer service and, you know, making you fax in, you know, and making you report your own scores and making you, you know, like buy your own softballs and buy your own flag belts. And so part of success also is, you know, is not just saying, oh, let's, you know, doing surveys. What do people love? What do people love? What do people love? What do people hate? And if you can solve what people hate, you can also be very successful.
Interesting. That's a cool perspective.
I'm jumping back and forth between, you know, just ideas I have and also part of a speech I gave in February, because a lot of these ideas are still topical because I gave some of the ideas. So what do people hate was a topic I talked about during the speech. So
okay,
if it sounds like I'm going over old ground, it's because I am. But that's what, you know.
Hey, that's all right.
That's what entrepreneurs do. It's new to you. I'm saying if Delaney's next to you listening,
she just got home.
She might be quite bored because she's like, I already heard this in February, you know. So I'm giving you the heads up.
I'm gonna make her watch the video though.
Yeah. Okay.
Next question. Where did your
I'll try not to curse so much so you don't have to bleep me.
no, you're fine. My
Yeah.
professor is a very realistic guy. He knows about
I curse a great deal.
the world and all the stuff. So
Yeah.
um and I'm not playing it in class. I think it's just a submission to him, so I don't think
Yeah.
he'll mind, if
Well, if he's
yeah.
so blown away that he wants me to come talk to your class, I do enjoy speaking, as Delaney can attest to. I do enjoy public speaking.
He gets a lot of speaking guests in. So on a multitude of different things. We had a guy that came in and was talking about he was he mapped carbon accounting is what his thing was, but it
Mm-hmm.
was all energy based, and it was talking about how do you essentially track. He was trying to create a process to track carbon footprints all the way down the line, right? So, like, if you, for example, wanted to say, what is my carbon footprint, you would have to take everything that you do and then backtrack it all the way down the line to zero. You couldn't go to Madden or to your other supplier and say, hey, what's the carbon that went into this? Because they would have to do the same assessment. So it's really intensive to get, accurate assessments of the amount of energy it takes to use things. And so he was talking about that, and he's based out of the UK and does speeches at Oxford. I mean, he's um, Jimmy Yang, I think was his name. But yeah, it was super interesting. And I mean, it got into like power grids and electric cars and how the California grid can't support it. And,
Yeah.
yada, yada, yada. I mean, it was a 2 hour kind of brain picking of him, which was pretty cool. And then we've got two guest speakers next week, and then we've got, I think, another one the week after that. So he definitely has guest speakers. So I will happily pass it along for you.
Yeah.
All right, question number 2.
Question number 2.
Where did your inspiration come from? And I think you kind of answered this already, but we'll get the question number 2 on record there.
I mean, I think there's two sides to it. I do see often, and I know for sure that there is, I mean, there's nature and there's nurture, right? But there's genetics, and I've seen just too many times. Look, you go out and you play basketball with your kid when they're 5 and they become a great basketball player. And you go out and you golf with your kid when they're 5 and they become a great golfer. And you go out and tell your kids stories about their grandfather who I had a grandfather named Alexander Rittmaster, who owned a boat company and a parking meter company and an ice cream company, and was like this Renaissance man who was like a stock broker, but also an entrepreneur, but also like would make people crazy bets all the time. And like apparently like bet somebody once that like an elephant was faster than a horse, and like went to the zoo and rented them. He had a few bucks and like had them race down a side street in Manhattan in New York during lunchtime. And like, I never met him, but for sure, I also have living entrepreneurs in my family who are quite successful, and there's no doubt. And I would watch them. I'd watch my uncle, come to Miami and literally sell shoes out of a rolling suitcase. And I just think that you see something like that when you're young, and it just it has an impact. So obviously my grandfather was a huge inspiration. My uncle is a big inspiration. My dad was always into like, my dad was never really into business. He was more into like betting, if you will, with stocks being the ultimate bet, but then NFL bets being the second bet. But like, so gambling, like craps, poker, blackjack. So he was always, numbers and moves and things and strategy and stuff like that. And, kind of almost game theory. And he'd love to figure out like little ways to be like, well, if I do it this way. And he was a little bit of a huckster. My my grandfather, Alexander Ritmaster, was a huckster. Obviously, my uncle made a couple mistakes because he ended up in prison for 2.5 years. So he was a huckster. If you want to talk about, we talked about the second bike ride and getting a second shot at things and time almost being a flat circle. My grandfather went to Eglin Air Force Base, which is a white collar prison, for insider trading in 1973, 74. And then 40 years later, my uncle went to the same prison for insider trading. So you can't tell me that there's not some kind of, and I haven't done that, but I'm saying like the idea of like just like genetics and like growing up in a household that like, and obviously my daughter now like started her own slime business. And I'd be like, for a couple of years, I was like, what do you want to do? She's like, I want to go to the park and sell slime. Just like when I was 10 years old and my friend would come sleep over and be like, what do you want to do? Like, I want to go wash cars for $5. And we would do so it was $5 for car wash or $10 for inside and outside, and then we double team it, and he would do the inside with a dust buster, and I would do the outside with the brushes and the sponges, and we could do a car twice as fast. And like that would literally be part of our sleepover date, would be like, and then you'd make the money and then you go play video games. But you can't tell me that like, the gift wrapping things and hearing stories about my grandfather and watching my uncle come sell shoes out of a rolling suitcase, and like literally like one of the best salesmen I've ever seen in my life, if not the best, and hearing the stories about my uncle owning Bertram yachts and Duncan parking meters, and and then having almost in some cases those artifacts in our house. We have, I can't show it to you, we have he would make these parking meter lamps, and you'd put a quarter in and turn it and the lamp would go on, and he'd give them out as gifts. And so I'd always have that lamp in my room when I was a kid. And it was that kind of idea of like, I've never seen anything like that before. It's a parking meter lamp, and we give it away as gifts. And that's the romantic, like, inspirational, where he died literally chopping down a tree in the woods of Maine 2 years before I was born. But obviously, Alexander Ritmaster, that's where I get the eyebrows from. But that's also where I get a lot of the, I think, entrepreneurial stuff, along with my uncle and along with my dad, and things like that. But then, so you've got the romantic version of the chopping down a tree, and you've got the romantic version of the Duncan parking meter lamp, and the romantic version is part of the reason why he probably went to jail for insider trading, is because they couldn't get him on bribing the mayor of Chicago to install all those parking meters, because it was always into something. But they couldn't really get him on that one, so they got him on this kind of bogus, securities fraud charge, which was like total bullshit, like selling unregistered securities, which had never been, basically like the pink sheets, the OTCs, which is now, now they sell unregistered crypto, right? So like it's at time, I think it was the first case ever prosecuted of selling unregistered. But it's always been, I think, in my blood. My mom really pushed to teach my brother and I the value of like working and earning money. We were watching this silly movie, Spanglish, like Saturday night, and there's a scene where he's like, "Hey, I'll give you $5 to like go get the colored glass, and I'll give you $1 for this glass, and I'll give you $5 for this glass." And the girl in the movie goes and gets like this giant pile of glass, and she's like, you owe me $640, and he gives the money to the girl, and he gets in a lot of trouble, about giving her. Like, I literally had that happen with me and my mom. My mom's like, I'll give you $5 for every bucket of rocks you fill to like do this landscaping project when we were growing up in our house when I was like 7 or 8 or 9. And I did it so fast. She's like, okay, we're going to do $1 a bucket. I can't afford $5 a bucket. And it's like exactly the same thing that happened in but Adam Sandler in the movie pays the money. My mom recalibrated the deal. But you come from a household like that where it's not like, where it's just like, well, let's go to the park and goof off, or versus like, we're going to do this and you're going to earn $1 a bucket or $5 a bucket, or, do you want to watch? I'll pay, I'll pay you $5 to wash my car. And I do it for my mom. And then I'm like, I wonder if I could do this for other people in the neighborhood, and that just comes from, that's like a family of, I don't know, I call it a family of business, but I've seen that happen oftentimes. You've got the lineage of, some guy got drafted in the draft. Pittsburgh drafted Joey Porter's son, right? He was apparently like a super hard hitting, cornerback, and Joey Porter was like one of the craziest linebackers. That's not a coincidence. It's a family thing. And I do think there are families of business. Sometimes they're not great families, and they've got this big long legacy, and then that's where you get the succession from, right? Just because there's a family of business doesn't mean it's a good family of business. But I certainly think that there's a genetic component and an environmental component to just becoming from an entrepreneurial background and hearing the stories of them growing up, of Alexander Ripmaster, seeing my uncle turn a tiny business into a multi-billion-dollar business, and at one point working for him for a year and a half and being like, yeah, give it a try, but seeing that stuff when you're a kid, seeing my uncle come to Miami and be selling shoes out of a taking a giant rolling suitcase of shoes out of a trunk, and my dad and he and I would drive around to shoe stores in Miami, drive around to Bloomingdale's, drive around to malls, and he'd take this gigantic rolling shoe suitcase out of my dad's trunk, and we'd be listening to Kenny Loggins in the car, and they'd be smoking cigarettes, and it was the coolest thing. And then for the guys, talking, and after all that guy talking, oh yeah, yeah, my uncle would get the suitcase and sell women's shoes out of the trunk to people at Bloomingdale's and Macy's, and they were like, these shoes are great, and that's the ultimate hustle, right? That's the ultimate I'm gonna. The product is great, the design is great, the presentation, but you see that over and over again. How many times have you heard a story of an entrepreneur who's I started selling this hot sauce, out of my car. I started selling this, the guy who started the sriracha business, crazy great entrepreneur. And they were telling him that's too spicy, and then he's like, then don't buy it, and he stuck with his guns, and it's a gigantic brand now. So many stories like that, of that kind of just in that, seeing somebody, you all the phrases, hey, don't give up, don't quit, don't take no for an answer. Yeah, that you can hear that all day long until you see somebody doing it. So you see somebody with that hustle, where my dad's driving the car and my uncle's getting out of the car and taking a giant rolling shoe suitcase out of a trunk and selling shoes on the almost on the street. If you're around that, you begin to think that most anything is possible in business, and it kind of is. If you never give up, it is, almost everything is possible. But yeah, I think that's the long answer to your question of inspiration, and I think it comes partly from genetics and partly from just the environment of coming from a crazy entrepreneurial stock trading, betting. There's always money changing hands in my family. Sometimes it was on NFL bets. Sometimes it was on shoes out of a trunk. Sometimes it was on, parking meters. Sometimes it was on putting a quarter in the parking meter so you could turn it on, so your lamp would come on. But it was always just a thing. Sometimes it was washing cars in the buckets and the $5, and you're too fast, so I'm going to downgrade it to $1. And also that ethos of I think some parents, especially nowadays, the idea of a summer job. When I grew up, that was a thing. My mom was like, go get a summer job. And I was in college, and I was delivering pizza for Domino's on Thursday nights, but I was also had 3 other student jobs, and I was washing dishes at Marriott. And I was like, this, I come from a family of workers, I think that there's a certain element to that, it's hard to explain, but the idea of when I was 13, my mom's like, go get a job. You go to summer camp for You go to sleepaway summer camp for like 8 weeks, or you could like go get a job at like working like at Chick-fil-A or working at McDonald's or sell at I worked at a baseball card store for 2 summers. And I was like, that was expected in my house. It was not expected that like, yeah, mow the lawn and like that's good. It was like, yeah, you got to mow the lawn, you got to wash the car, and go get a job. Like, and like it was just like, yeah, we were just come from a family of workers. My dad, my uncle, my mom, they all had their unique quirks, but there was never a point where they like half-assed it. They were all workers. My mom was a much different worker. My mom sold art and was a interior designer, and very much of the art deco scene from Miami. Had her own art gallery at one point. My dad was a stockbroker. Stockbroker calling people up and making trades, and they were all workers, and then always kind of selling. If you ever saw Glengarry Glen Ross, my dad was very much the Pacino character in Glengarry Glen Ross, where he'd sit down at the bar with you and like explain to you this long story, and then all of a sudden, before you knew it, you'd be buying stock from him. But he was always working. Even when he was at the bar, he was always selling, much like my uncle was always selling. So when you're around people that are always working and always selling, eventually you become, whether you want to or not, you're going to end up being an entrepreneur. Everyone's selling something. I said this in the speech in Kansas City. Everyone's always selling something. As if you're a boss and somebody says, I don't like sales, you should be very nervous. When I hear that in an interview, I get my antenna immediately goes up, because you're always selling something. Now, what some people mean is they don't like cold calling, and cold calling sucks, and like that's fine. I don't like calling people I don't know up over the phone or sending them random cold emails trying to sell something. So I don't like selling. I don't like cold emails. I don't like cold calling. That's fine. I don't like selling at all. You're always selling. You're selling an idea, you're selling a product, or you're selling yourself. You're a referee. Guess what you're selling? You're selling your calls. You're always selling. You're always selling. You're selling a vision. Hey, this is where we're going. It's going to take us 3 years to get there. We have to sell that to other people. Nobody ever got rich on their own, unless they were like a Vanderbilt or something, or like, just inherited it from the Walton family or something, like Succession style. You're always selling. You're selling a vision. You're selling an idea. You're selling a product. You're selling gift wrap. You're selling a car wash, or you're selling yourself. Hey, I can help you get this to the next level. So if somebody comes to me and says, no, I don't like sales, I immediately ask a lot of follow-up questions there, because I come from a family of salesmen, and you're always selling.
I got my first start in sales selling cell phones at a Radio Shack.
Yeah.
So, and then I was the guy in the mall that was at the booth selling you a cell phone for T-Mobile for a while after that. And
yeah,
I loved it. I made really good money doing it. It was a commission-based industry, and I made a boatload of money. It was a lot of fun. And for whatever reason, I have a trusting face, so people bought stuff from me. I don't know. But yeah, selling. It was interesting because I took the Radio Shack on Crown Hill, like 87th and 15th Northwest, from a $400,000 store to a $750,000 store in a year, which was, and most of it was on sales numbers. It was just literally talking to the people that came in, and it was interesting because it was, people were like, oh, I can get it cheaper over here. I'm like, yeah, but like if you come back, like I'll help you with it. And so it's I've always loved sales. Like that's just a thing. I like being around people. And then now, as a bartender, obviously, selling liquor is pretty easy. People want what I'm selling now. But yeah, that's that was cool. That was also just a cool background story too. Right.
Yeah, I'll try and tighten up these answers. I don't want you to be editing film for unless you think it's good. I got too many. As Delaney can attest, I have too many stories. So,
hopefully, I'm gonna figure out how to do all this editing stuff because I am not a person that makes a lot of movies. So, I'm pretty sure that I can go through and use some like dictation software, so it'll dictate it. So instead of having to like rewatch the video over and over, I can skim through, find points, and like break it down that way.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
If not, then I'll give my professor a long video and be like, sorry, this is what you get.
I believe in you.
Yeah, I'll figure it out. All right. Question number 3. How did you move from idea to something actually succeeding in the market?
I probably should have looked over these questions before we got together.
That's all right. I sent them to you a month ago.
How did I move from? Say it again.
How did you move from an idea to something actually succeeding in the market?
I mean, that's tough to say. Like the idea was always for Underdog was run. I'm in front of a League Lab logo, so that that might be contradictory because I'm talking about mostly about Underdog. But I think the idea was always easy. I played in intramural leagues. I refed leagues, and these leagues were kind of running before I even started Underdog. I think that to answer the question slightly differently, I think I was just always driven by a notion of quality. And for whatever goofy reason, there was a book called, I think it's called Zen, the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, that I read in high school. And for whatever reason, maybe because of my mom, maybe because, certainly not because of my dad, but maybe because of my mom, maybe because of that book, maybe because of all the above, I was just really driven by the notion of quality. And like this internal, like almost like feeling, like a gut feeling of just like, this needs to be better. This isn't good enough. And I was always trying to, the idea of a sports league was there, but the idea of a high quality sports league for people who weren't good at sports was something I had never seen. And so that was always what drove me. And in some cases, right, like that's, I think what Starbucks kind of tapped into, right? It's like, here's fancy coffee for people who aren't fancy. And you'll kind of see that theme kind of crop up over and over again, like the kind of like almost access, right? Like if you look at like Zillow or Expedia was one of the first companies to really like there used to be this really closed off idea of like travel agents, again, like the taxi cabs, right? Like who controlled everything. And then all of a sudden they didn't control everything. And the travel agents, like there was a time when like you wanted to go on a trip and you had to call somebody and be like, how much is this trip going to cost? And like, can I book it through you? And Expedia came along and was like, just busted it wide open. Uber came along and busted it wide open. You'll see most of the disruptive kind of I don't love that word disruptive, but most of the disruptive businesses are ultimately busting something open that was always kind of closed and always kind of like hard or impossible or kind of controlled. Stocks again, controlled by 5 or 6 brokerage firms, and like an E-Trade came along, right? And like kind of opened it up for everybody. It's like, hey, you can actually like be like a normal person and not have to have like a stockbroker. Because I was trading stocks when I was a kid, and I think my first stock I bought was Blockbuster Video. But because again, I come from a background of stock traders and business people, but I think the commission was $150 on the trade, right? E-Trade came along and said, we'll do it for $9. Now E-Trade does it for $0. It's free. They opened it up. So it wasn't this like, this highfalutin stockbroker being like, I control all the information. Now you can get the stock quotes on your phone. So I think the idea of like, that was always an idea for me of like, can you open this up where like, instead of only getting good gear and good fields and good equipment and even good software, you have to be good at sports. And I tried to almost invert it and say like, what if and I tracked down the lady in Florida who makes the flags for the NFL. And I, spent a lot of time Delaney can tell you stories about I forced Bodden to make a new kickball. And I was like, this kickball isn't good enough for adults. This is the kickball was called PG-10. PG stands for playground, meaning that you're selling this to kids playing on the playground. If you've got a 200-pound adult kicking this ball, it's going to last about an inning. And then it's going to be warped, and it's going to pop, and it's going to stink. And that, again, that idea of quality, like your kickball took off in 2002, 2003, 2004, and I'm very lucky for it, right? It was a huge benefit for Underdog and League Lab. And I believe pickleball is having that same kind of moment right now that kickball had 20 years ago. So again, history repeats itself, time is a flat circle. But they're, great entrepreneurs always seem to like kind of say, I've got this idea, I know where I'm going, but they have this, especially some of the great ones, right? Like, the Steve Jobs of the world and stuff like that. To some extent, Elon Musk, although obviously the jury's out on what his story is on any given day. But the notion of quality, you can't argue that you pick up an iPhone and it's not an amazing quality device. You can't argue that you get in a Tesla and you're like, the first time I got a Tesla, I've never seen a car like this before. I've never seen an interior car like this before. I've never seen a car drive like this before. Like, I've never seen a car like this before. The quality is amazing. And you'll see whether it's, Walt Disney or Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, it's kind of like, is very much like, they always want to they seem like megalomaniacs, and they are, because they're so focused on quality. They want to take everything over and just like own it all. And like, constant stories about, like the glass on the screen of the iPhone and, relentlessly, working on it. And, to have it be like just an amazing device that kind of revolutionized like kind of life, for it's not a small, probably one of the most important inventions in the last 50 to 100 years. So, but they're always driven by this idea of like, this should just be better. And I was always, struck by the idea that like the good referees and the good gear and the good fields were like kind of always reserved for the good players. And I was like, you should be able to play in a really great field and have great gear and have great refs and have fun refs and not old crappy refs, even if you stink at sports. And I think that was always the vision that I tried. And because I always stunk at sports, but I love sports. I love watching sports. I love playing sports, but I was terrible at sports. I was awful at sports. I got cut from my baseball team in high school. I got cut from the basketball team. I ended up being a wrestler. I mean, I played Little League. I was terrible. I played soccer when I was a kid. I was terrible. But I love sports. I grew up in a sports family. I grew up listening to Yankees games with my dad on the radio. So I think that the thing from idea to execution was there's leagues and anyone can run a league. There's software, anyone can run a software, but that notion of quality was always the driving factor. There's division of hey, accessibility. There's this very small tranche of like people playing in tournaments and leagues for cash prizes, and then there's like the other 90% who don't want to do that. And everything was catering towards them. And even when I started, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm going to cater towards them. I'm going to run like these men's tournaments with cash prizes, and I try to do statistics. At one point, actually, is a funny anecdote. At one point for Underdog, I actually paid somebody for every softball game to score the softball game manually, so the umpire didn't have to worry about the score. And then I paid somebody else to take all those score sheets and put them in Excel, and we created scoreboards. Because in my mind, when I first started, I knew what I was doing. Like, that was my idea of quality. Like, hey, you can have like, you open the newspaper and you see the box score and the batting averages and the leaderboards. Who's leading the major leagues in home runs? Who's leading the major leagues in batting average? Like you go on ESPN.com. So deliver that high quality experience for a rec league. And I was like, that's my quality. And that was an enormous, enormous, enormous mistake. Because what it did was it brought all the people who only cared about stats and being the league leader in home runs and running up the score and getting more RBIs. And somebody would have 20 RBIs and they'd call the office and say, I actually have 21 RBIs. You missed an RBI because your scorekeeper messed up. And I was like, screw this, no more stats. Because what it would do is encourage people to run the score up and just hit homer after homer after homer and take extra bases and all the things. It was the antithesis of Underdog. But it was a gigantic mistake. And by the way, it almost kind of bankrupted the company too in like year 3, because I was just paying all these scorekeepers. I was paying people to like sit there and like do data entry for like hours and hours on end just to get like a batting average leaderboard. It was in retrospect, it was a terrible idea, but you can see where it came from. It came from this idea of, I want to give a high quality experience to people who aren't good at sports. And then all it did is really encourage the people who were really good at sports to just be better and just run the score up and hit home runs. And the people who were bad at sports were like, oh, I'm never on the leaderboard. What do I care? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not getting, like, you're not giving me a baseball card with my stats on the back, so I don't care. Like, so, but it was that attempt. It was that attempt of like, I want to create a great experience for people who aren't great at sports. And that was the idea that I always try to push through. And whether it was, bowling or mini golf and kind of like, again, like opening up, much like the Zillow, much like the Expedia, I always like the idea of like opening up these kind of like stodgy things, with bowling leagues being a great example. Like if you wanted to go to a bowling league, Leilani Lanes, and the owner of Leilani Lanes was Jerry Hahn, and cool guy. And when I first walked in there, much like almost every business experience in my life, he was like, you're crazy. Because they had 4 people on a team. But again, get back to the mechanics of it. What do people hate? They had 4 people on a team. The bowling season was 33 weeks long. And in order to play in the league, you had to pay the treasurer every night for each week of the season. It's worse than a taxi cab. Versus, I came to him, I said, you need to give me $3 a bowler. He's like, that's way too low. These people are paying $10 a bowler a night. I'm like, yeah, those people aren't drinking. They're not buying beer in your bar. They're really, really serious about their bowling score. And they're playing 3 matches a night. And there's only 4 of them. I'm going to give you 6 to 8 people per team. Give me 2 matches a night. I'll buy drink prizes. I'll buy beer prizes. Give me a special. They'll buy even more beer. And whatever you're missing between the $3 a bowler and $10 a bowler, you'll make up way more in food and beverages. And he said, there's no way this is going to work. And 6 months later, he's like, how many more leagues can you run here? And, every entrepreneur has that experience. But again, this tying together, like, what do people hate? Like, if you're a 22-year-old and you love bowling, why are you, unless you're just an absolute expert who can roll a 250 or 280 or you can roll a 300 game, you're never going to play in a 33-week bowling league. It's not accessible to just people who just want to bowl and have fun. So there was always that idea of quality, but there was always that idea of accessibility. Like, even if you stink at sports, it's up to me to find a spot for you. Even if you're new to sports, and most people are new to kickball. Like, most people haven't played kickball in 20 years or ever in life. So it's up to me to make it fun for you. It's not up to you to prove to me that you're good so I can put you in this tournament, this league, or stuff like that. And that was always kind of the guiding idea. Quality and accessibility. Like, quality of like giving people great fields, great umps, great gear, not making them go buy their own gear, and a great experience, but also opening it up to people who maybe had never thought they could play sports or never thought they could be a bowler or a miniature golfer or a flag football player or a dodgeballer or a kickballer or a volleyball player. And like, yeah, like we've got really nice spots on the beach for beach volleyball, and some people are really good at beach volleyball, and some people are like, I just want to go out on the beach in Seattle in the summertime and like not get the ball spiked into my face by some person who's like way too good to be playing against me. And that's, part of it too. Like if you just want to try volleyball for the first time, you join the AVP league. You're going to join it's the same thing as the bowling league. It's like these very, very, you know, I want to say elitist, but they're bordering on, if you've seen some of the beach volleyball players, like this very, very specialized, like kind of like, yeah, you're not part of the club, you're not part of that. And we try to always open that up. You don't need to join the 33-week bowling league. The softball league, I think, for the city used to be like 17 weeks long, or it was like 9 weeks long with double headers every game, and like all these weird rules. And like we always tried to say, but you get a 50-year-old umpire who was totally out of touch and didn't run and didn't talk to you and didn't make jokes and didn't care. And then, you know, like we'd always tried to push the idea of quality, but also open it up to people. Instead of going after that top 10% who are really good at sports, I always try to go after the bottom 90% who kind of saw sports as like entertainment as opposed to sports is my life, sports is end all be all. And we have good athletes and good players that play an Underdog, but it's always the approach to sports, not the skill level of sports. And if you have a right approach, you're laid back to sports, but you're really good. It's my job to put you with other people that are good, so you don't smash the heck out of people that are really bad who are playing their first season, you know, with indie teams, you know, with people who are just moved to the city and they're like, I'm 23 years old. I played kickball when I was 10. I don't know anybody. I'm playing kickball to have fun, relive some retro glory, and meet some people. You can give them the high quality KB 10 and not the PG 10, because I made them make a high quality kickball for you, and Baden like now sells it to all the other kickball leagues across the country. But I made them make a high quality kickball because I said, this isn't good enough. This isn't good enough for adult kickball. You're trying to take your youth kickballs and give them to adults, and it's not good enough. Make me a different kickball. And they did it. And I bought a whole bunch, and other people bought it. And, you know, I had to learn about factories and all kinds of stuff I didn't want to learn about. And it's like latex rubber things and, you know, pumps and valves and factories in Vietnam and factories in China. And like, but I did it because of the idea of quality. The idea of, even if you stink at kickball, you should have a really good kickball to play kickball with, and a really good field, and a really good bar, and a really good umpire, and a really good website. And, you know, even if you stink at sports, you should have a high quality experience.
Yeah, like, so, I mean, making things accessible for the masses, right? Like,
yeah,
I think that's important, because everybody like people want that. They want to participate. They want to be in stuff, and they don't always get the opportunity.
There was even more. If I think back more towards the beginning of Underdog, there was even more like almost like country club-esque things about like the city softball league, of like, yeah, you have to be grandfathered in, and like it was literally like almost a country club but for softball. And people would come to us because they'd be like, there's no space for me. I'd be like, why don't they just open up more field space? I'd be like, no, they only, you know, again, it was this very like regimented, rigid thing. And, you know, how do you join a 33-week bowling league if it's week 17? Like, how do you just, you know, well, come back next year? You know, like, it's just, there's, in many cases, we're lucky because there's so many leagues and setups and situations that were built for serious athletes, serious players, serious people. And yeah, like if you want to be serious about sports, like, you know, go to town. But there's way more people out there who just want to do it for 5, 6, 7 weeks, have fun, get a couple pictures. They don't care if they win or lose. And that's always what we've been about. And you have that thread going through all this of me talking to the lady who makes the NFL flags for referees, and figuring out who she was and buying those flags for my referees. But also saying like, hey, I want you to be a great referee. That's why I'm giving you the flags they use in the NFL. Just don't act like the dudes who are in the NFL.
Yeah.
Right? And hey, Baden, make the KB10. And hey, Jerry from Leilani, give me a 6-week bowling league at $3 a person for 2 games a night, 2 matches a night, not 3. But I'm paying you all at once. I'm not paying you every week. I'm not having this weird, awkward thing where like you have to pay the treasurer of the bowling league every week. He's like, well, that's just not how we do it. I'm like, yeah, but how you do it's wrong. Because again, if it was so great, there wouldn't have been the space for me to get started. If all these leagues were so great, I never would have had a chance because there'd be no space. Leilani would have been full on Thursday nights, and instead it was empty. And at one point, we were running leagues on Leilani at 7 p.m. and then 9 p.m. on Thursday night, and we'd run like 2 14, 16 team leagues back to back, one at 7 p.m. and one at 9 p.m. And they bowl till 11 o'clock at night. There's nobody else in that bowling alley except for casual, just people just coming by at 10 o'clock on a lane. That's Thursday night. And then when the Leilani closed, we did the same thing at Sunset lanes. And then Sunset closed. And it's like, well, crap, we don't got there's no one else to do this anymore. And the same thing happened. There was a place called Hollywood Bowl in
I remember Hollywood,
Portland. Yeah. And we did the same thing. And Hollywood said this, it said the same exact thing to me. Oh, no, this will never work. And I was like, no, it'll work. Trust me. I already did it in Seattle. It'll work. And we started our first sport in Portland when we expanded in 2005 was bowling. And then we did kickball secondly. And we found a kickball field in Portland. And they, again, after this weird, awkward meeting with Portland Parks and Rec, they're like, yeah, nobody ever used that field. I said, perfect. That's the field I want. They were like, no, what about this field? What is it? I said, nope, I want this one. It's called Unthank. It was a grass infield. And I was like, this is the field. And for whatever reason, I just got this gut feeling of like, and that was our first ever, actual league. Bowling was indoors. Our first ever outdoor league was at Unthank Park in Portland. And I remember seeing a picture of it and looking it up on my phone and being like, this is where we're starting. And they were almost like, oh, nobody plays there. And I was like, great. That means there should be lots of space available for me. I don't know if you've ever seen World According to Garp, but there was one of my favorite scenes of all time. It's a movie, Rob Williams, actually. There's a pretty famous scene where like a plane, they're looking at houses to buy, and a plane crashes into the house. And the guy's like, I'll take it. They're like, what do you mean? You can't take it. A plane just crashed into it. He's like, no, it's perfect. What are the odds another plane is going to crash into this house again? And I was, for some reason, I just always kind of like, I think a lot of great entrepreneurs have that kind of like, great. I moved to Seattle and I'd always wanted to have a place. And I remember my first condo. I was like buying, it was a big deal for me. I was like buying my first condo in Seattle, like 2005. And I was like, and they were like, it was this perfect spot, but it was this weird, like not a common real estate sign. It just looked weird. It's almost like a homemade real estate sign, like a sign that's like, for sale, but you couldn't quite tell which unit it was pointing at. And I like looked at it, like the view was amazing and like 900 square feet. But the location was amazing. The view was amazing. It's a good location karmically for me. And the broker was like, I haven't been able to get a hold of this broker for 2 weeks. And I was like, great. That's the only chance I have to get this place. Right? Like if it's an even playing field, I have no chance. Right? If your competition knows what they're doing and they're the city and they own all the parks, they're the bowling alley, they own all the lanes, you should have no chance. But luckily, they don't know what they're doing. And that's where the opportunity comes from. But it only comes if you try and make it more accessible and get rid of the 33-week bowling league cartel and get rid of the crappy equipment and get rid of the kind of, elitist stuff and open it up to everybody like Expedia did, like Glassdoor tries to do. Open Door, whatever it's called. Like, a lot of great companies like Uber did, opening it up and not having this insular thing where there's only a couple of monopolies and to control everything, but also controlling the information, right? Controlling the accessibility and the information. And the information could be, where do you get the cool gear? The information could be, how do you make better gear? The information could be, how do you get these fields that seem like they're kind of always controlled by a couple of groups? And it's all part of the same thing. And you see that over and over again in business. Companies that come along and open up something like the E-Trades, like the brokerage firms, that was very insulated and very elitist, and they open it up so that everyone can have access to. With phones being the ultimate open and upper, like I'm saying that the wrong way. With like phones are almost the most democratic thing in the last 100 years because it allows everyone to be a journalist.
Journalist, videographer, everybody's connected at all times
Yeah,
to everything. I mean, yeah, that's
yeah. Does the situation like George Floyd, for example, does that happen if people don't have smartphones?
I mean, most likely no.
Yeah. I mean,
Because
so like that's the idea of like opening things up so that anybody can, anyone can take photos, anyone can take videos, anyone can play in a league, anyone can be a captain, anyone can be a player.
yeah,
Like that opening up has always been part of the idea and the dream for Underdog.
nice. Um, Question number 4. How did you organize your team? So original employees, or how did you build from you, one guy, to your team of referees, to where you are now?
I've never been good with org charts or things like that. I think the best organization of the team was I finally learned after a lot of trial and error to always have a starting point for people. And I'm learning this lesson now in software. But you'll see with a lot of great organizations, they kind of always have a kind of a starting spot. I mean, Zappos was very famous for this, I think, for a while, where every single person would start in customer service for 3 weeks. Didn't matter what job you were doing, if you were the corporate lawyer, if you were the VP, you worked in the call center for 3 weeks, and that was the starting point. And we finally figured out, through just trial and error, like we're just a unique business, and the best people always started as referees and umpires. Nick started as a referee. Delaney started as a supervisor and a referee. On and on and on and on. Eric started as an umpire. Like every single great employee I've ever had started at the bottom. And A, they show the work ethic to be great because they are great people. But B, they learned things from the ground up. And I think that's always the greatest problem is not an org chart or who's the VP or who's the CFO. The biggest problem for a company is always being disconnected from where the magic happens. And you always there's a corporate office, but then maybe you have, and by the way, you see this done sometimes brilliantly and sometimes terribly by undercover boss, right? Because all undercover boss is just like, here's this dude or this lady who's super disconnected from where the shit actually goes down. It could be a White Castle, it could be a Build-A-Bear, it could be a Make a Pretzel franchise, like whatever it is. But it's like, here's this boss, and they're totally disconnected from where the rubber hits the road, like where the magic happens. And it could be, a shoe store, it could be an ice cream shop, it could be a candy store. But, there's no magic to it except to say, like, if you get disconnected from the customer and then you're just getting bits and pieces filtering through and you're like relying on surveys and you're like, well, our net promoter score is really good. So like, I can't tell you how many times we would hire somebody. And again, I developed a skill over the course of 15 years, got my 10,000 hours in. But, I get to the point where I can look at somebody in 5 minutes and be like, this person is going to make it or not as a referee or umpire, or supervisor, et cetera. And so the first part was creating a structure whereby no matter who you were in the office and the corporate world, both cities, Portland and Seattle, how did you start? And we got to the point where we just had somebody, start in Portland, and we made part of the interview be, you need to step on the field and ref. And he's like, I don't know how to ref. Well, then try your best. And I think a lot of organizations would be like, Again, we talked about sales, right? I don't like sales. I don't like reffing. I don't like umping. And we used to be like, oh, no problem. Like we'd have a, for instance, we'd have a recruiter to recruit refs and umpires who'd never been a referee or umpire. And those people were terrible. And then we're like, wait a second, we should have the referee recruiter be a referee. And then things got better. And then we should have we try to create these positions of people who are just great people or smart people or good interviewers. And so the second main piece of the organization team was when things really started to change, was not just realizing that people had to start at the field. And those are the best people came from. And then just pay attention. Like, go to the field to hear from your customer and see what's really going on. But if people are at the field and they're having to do reports and they're dealing with problems, the great people will stand out immediately. And then just take those great people and be like, hey, you're great at this. Do you want to come in the office and do more? And you can still work at the field. I still work at the field. I was at the field 2 Thursdays ago, right? Because I never want to be disconnected from where the magic happens. Whether it's the floor of a store, whether that's the counter, where the red cap, the field where the magic happens, because most businesses have at least 2 offices: the office where the magic happens, the store, the retail front, and the second office where like the corporate stuff goes on and the meetings happen and the CFO is looking at numbers and stuff. But the second main piece to turn around was also the idea of like, which I learned from a guy named Perry Marshall, which is the idea of don't do interviews, do auditions. And so even when we had to kind of jump the system, like we kind of did for this new hire down in Portland starting this year, we still made him ref because it's an audition, not an interview. And an interview says, we're going to sit down where I'm hiring for a jazz band and I need a trombonist. And we're going to sit down and you're going to tell me about how long you play the trombone for. And we're going to talk about who your favorite musicians are. We're going to talk about how many different bands you've played in. We're going to talk about who's your inspirations. We're going to talk about all these other things. An audition is, here's a piece of music you've never seen before. Play the trombone. And when you have confidence in an organization, you've been doing it long enough, you can listen to that person play the trombone for 3 minutes and be like, okay, you might not be exactly where I need to be, but you're going to make it. Versus, and then you'll often see when you push people in interviews to be an actual audition, most people don't like that. Most people just kind of want to sit down and talk and, oh, hey, let me tell you, let me give me these gimmicky answers. And, well, what's my biggest fault? My biggest fault is I probably work too hard and I care too much. And I really, these people are still doing this stupid shit, right? But people are comfortable in that interview process and they have college courses about how to interview. Make the person do the job. Like, you want to see what somebody's made out of? Do role playing. Like, you're hiring somebody for customer service. Pick up the phone. Hey, I'm an angry captain. Hey, I signed up for this league and I didn't get into it. What are you going to do about it? And just see what they do. And there's no right answer, right? And but you can see people who have grit and people who have been through it and people who have grown up fast, which is one of my favorite, questions of like, my favorite attributes is I like to hire people for the team that have grown up fast. I hate to say it, but they often have like serious and or sad stuff in their background. And what happened is not that, sad stuff is awesome, but that it forced them to deal with stuff at a younger age. It forced them to go through tough, painful stuff. And then when you ask them to do some of the stuff in your job, the stuff that most people would like just wilt like a flower in the desert, they're like, oh, this is nothing. You should see some of the shit I've been through. Like, you think this getting yelled at on the flag football field about a flag guard? My dad went to prison when I was 14 years old and I was the head of the household for the next 4 years. This is nothing. So like when you put people through the audition, and some people can kind of torture people in audition, right? And like throw all kinds of wild cards at them and curveballs and stuff. And Done that once in a while, but that's mostly like, not super cool. But I know other people who've done that. But like when you do the audition, when you make the person stand up and call balls and strikes in an office, you start to see very quickly who can like think on their feet, who can deal with pressure, who can deal with, oh, this is unlike any other interview I've ever been in, and who's like very uncomfortable. And they're kind of, and like you ask them to be in character, and Nick does this all day long, right? And we'll just yell in their face, right? And you'll see some people who like, hey, everyone ever yell at you as a bartender? Is that ever happened once or twice, right? So you'll yell in somebody's face, and you'll see somebody, and they're like, listen, I hear what you're saying. And you'll see somebody, and you yell at the person, they're like, and you can tell that's a person yelled at before. And like, that sucks. But like, you're probably not going to make a very good referee, because even when you make a great call, you make a good call, you get yelled at. If you make a great call, you get yelled at even more than a good call. And so again, most people have it backwards, right? Oh, if I make a good call, everything's gonna be good. Make a bad call, I deserve to get yelled at. In reality, you make a bad call, you get yelled at. You make a good call, you get yelled at. You make a great call that nobody understands, you get yelled at even more than the good call. And so putting pressure on people in the audition process before they even step foot on the field. And I say, oh, this person seems like great personality. And what happens is, and every single business does this, including mine, people fall for energy as opposed to effectiveness. Oh, this person's so awesome. They're so funny. They've got so much energy. There's so excitement, energy, enthusiasm. All three dangerous E's. Versus the most important E, effectiveness. Can you do the job? But what's really the job? The job isn't really reffing. The job is communicating and diffusing conflict. That's the job. The rules change, the sport changes. Your job is communicating information and diffusing conflict. And I'm going to test you on diffusing conflict and communicating information in the interview, because I'm going to make it an audition. I'm going to make you uncomfortable in that interview. And how many interviews have you sat through where somebody tried to make you uncomfortable? No, you want to be comfortable. You go and you sit in a nice, would you like a glass of water? And you've got your suit on and your tie on. You got your thing with your resumes, and so tell me about your background. And it's like, yeah, okay, well, here's the job. You made a great call, pass interference. This dude's yelling in your face. What do you do? And once we figured that out, that was how to assemble the team that we needed, like a lot of things changed for us. And we stopped wasting our time with the three trapeze, not trapeze artists, the three traps that all start with E's: energy, enthusiasm. I forget what the third E is. I said it before. Energy,
excitement,
energy, enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Because guess what? If you're interviewing for a job, like almost every single person has energy and excitement, enthusiasm, or at least they pretend to. And if they don't, well, then that should be an easy interview to score. But they're like, I guess I could work here. I don't know. Like maybe you do that at Dick's, drive-through, or Dick's Hamburgers. But like for the most part, like most people show up to the interview like super fired up. And they're like, I want to work here so bad. And they happen full of shit. Whatever. It's part of the game. But we have a lot of rough interviews because our interviews are auditions. And people come out pissed off. But guess what? We just did both of us a favor. Because you are a nice person, and you do have energy, and you do have enthusiasm. But we have a system that's been working for 23 years. And so because you're a nice person, I just did you a favor by not putting you in a system that I know you're going to fail in. And because you're a nice person, because you're enthusiastic, because you have energy and excitement, I'm not going to put you through a system I know you're going to fail in, because you don't know how to do the job. You know how to talk in an interview. You know how to give good, smart sounding answers. But when I push you on the stuff that matters, conflict, communication, thinking on your feet, dealing with curveballs out of the blue, making quick quality decisions. When I push you on that stuff, you fall to pieces, and you'll see it happen. You'll see the person fall out of character. And you'll be like, hey, we're doing a role playing here. I'm an angry player. We'll do it with people in the office. Delaney does it all the time. Yeah. Hey, listen, I'm an angry captain. Guess what? People get angry. You've been on social media lately? People get angry. They call on the phone angry. They send an angry email. They're angry on the field. They're angry. Small business isn't what you do when things go right. Small business is what you do when things go wrong. Small business is what you do when everything goes wrong. If everything always went right, everyone would always run their own business. Some of the greatest stories I have as an entrepreneur is stuff I did when everything went to shit. And that's who you want. You want somebody when things go to shit, they're like, that's okay. I've dealt with this before. Things go to shit. People want to fight each other in a flag football game, bunch of stupid dudes in a championship flag football game. It's like, this is nothing. I've dealt with this shit before. Like, guys, come on. Like, versus the person where they're like, I'm nervous. What do I do? And you'll see them fall out of character, right? Like, hey, I'm an angry player. Talk to me like I'm the official. Talk to me like you're the official. I'm the angry player. You talk to me like you're the official. Ref, what are you talking about? I didn't even touch him. And some people will be like, well, sir, I'm sorry, sir. So I'm sorry, but I'm like, right? That's one response, right? Second response is, right? No, listen, go back to your huddle. Don't talk to me. It was pass interference. I don't want to hear anymore. If I hear anymore, you're out of the game. There's also a response you get, right? But that's not even the worst response. The worst response you get is actually the person who can't even stay in character. When you put them in a role-playing situation, they just instantly become uncomfortable. They're like, so what's the rule for pass interference? Or should I talk to you? And I'm like, no, talk to me like I'm the player. Ref, that's the worst call. So do I have another referee with me, or should I? And like, they don't know where to start. Those people never, ever work. I don't care if you're working the counter at McDonald's, or you're working the call center at Zappos, or you're working as a flag football referee for Underdog Sports Leagues. People are going to be pissed off, and you're going to be communicating with them. If you can't deal with conflict and you can't communicate, then you can't work for us. It took us a long time to figure that out, but once we figured it out, everything else got easier.
That last part actually kind of leads into the next question pretty well. So question number 5, if you could have, what would you have done differently?
I mean, everything. I told you about, the stats. I told you about, I made just a billion mistakes. I think probably the one thing I would do is, it sounds silly and corny to say, but I would have trusted my gut more. I can't tell you how many times I've had people who were kind of filling a position, and I knew it wasn't going to work out. And in some cases, and I've heard this a lot, and I don't mean to be mean, but in some cases, I've gone to fire somebody, and they start crying. Again, this is stuff they don't teach you in business school. They teach you about charts and finances and profit margins, but they don't really teach you, like, hey, this person stinks, and you go to fire them and they start crying. And they say, please give me another chance. And what do? And then I'm like, okay, well, let's have a 3-month probation. Let's have a 6-month probation. We'll meet every week. And of course, the person is great for the first couple months, and they start backsliding. And then guess what happens? Month 4, month 5, you're right back in the same spot. And you just wasted 5 months. I think it's good to make mistakes. So I don't think I want to take away the mistakes I made. I don't think I want to take away the mistake I made with the stats for softball, where I attracted the wrong people. I almost bankrupted the company. I don't think I want to take away mistakes I made across the board with software, with the mistakes I made with. It took me. I wrote when I wrote the book for refereeing. I had 14 versions of the book. I wrote the book 3 times, and the third time I had 14 versions. I don't think you want to take away the mistakes I made in the first 2 books I wrote, because those mistakes ended up making the final product. Like that which breaks you often makes you. And like that's when I talk about grew up fast and having that stuff in your background. You'll see a lot of time with very successful people, they've got some real heavy stuff in their background, and they either just fall to pieces or they go right through it and become better. And COVID is the ultimate example of that for Underdog and League Lab. Went through it, got better. So I don't want to take away the mistakes, but I do want to take away not trusting my gut more, and going to getting to the point where it's like, hey, I got to let you go. And the person's like, no, please, 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 please. I can't think of one time where I've had a gut decision. This bar is going to screw me. This field's not going to work out. This referee's not going to work out. And I'm like, but you know what? Let's try it anyway. It's like 1 out of 100 times where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm totally surprised. And the other 99 times, like, it's like this worked out exactly how I thought it was going to work out. I just didn't want to listen to myself. Everybody's lies. The biggest lies are the lies you tell yourself. Sometimes the lie you tell yourself is, I'll do it tomorrow. Sometimes the lie you tell yourself is, I'm going to start on that new eating plan on Monday morning. And for this weekend, I'm going to have fun, and I'm going to start it Monday morning. And sometimes the lie is, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like a hell yes. But let's see how it works out. Referees, umpires, office people, or this person isn't working out, and I know they're not working out, and I know they're a bad fit, and I've got up-teen stories about how it's not working out, up-teen anecdotes, and you hear, and then the worst part is when you finally get rid of the person, and then you get 14 different stories of, oh, thank goodness you got rid of that person. I didn't want to tell you when they were here, but boy, here's a story that'll blow your mind. And I was like, holy crap, if I had known that, I never would have given the person a probation and give him a second chance. But for whatever reason, that just seems to be the way it always works, right? Like all this, you get rid of somebody, and once they're gone, people are like, oh, whew, that person's gone. Let me tell you the story that you never heard, but that happens so many times. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me this before? I wouldn't have stressed about this for 6 months. But that's just the way it works. But the stress shouldn't be, there's all these stories behind the scenes that people were afraid to tell me. The story should be, you were afraid to listen to yourself. You knew this person was a bad fit. And by the way, sometimes people are good fits and they can't move, they can't level up. Your company starts in a certain spot, and for a year or two, that person might be awesome. And that might be exactly what you need. But if you want to level up and become a more professional organization, there's a lot of people that can't make the leap. And that's just human nature. There's nothing wrong with the person. And a lot of times also, I've tried to level somebody up when I shouldn't have. And somebody started at one position, and I've given them more responsibility, and they fell to pieces. And I was like, what's going on here? And what's going on here was like, I put too much on this person. And you'll see that a lot of times in organizations. It's almost like the success syndrome, right? Like someone proves they can do something. People do this to my wife all the time. You do a good job with something, and then people just keep giving you more and more stuff to do. And then it's like, wait, like, I think one time I had like a gear guy, and like, I swear I put him in charge of an e-commerce store. And he was great at packing paperwork and gear for the leagues. He was a referee. He was great at doing paperwork, great at doing gear. And I'm like, also, you're running the e-commerce store. And it totally was a disaster, but it was my fault. I was like, what? I kept giving him more stuff. Well, he does gear for the leagues. Why can't he do drop shipping for an e-commerce gear store? And if the answer is because he can't, and he's never done it before. And those two things, the only thing they have in common is the word gear. And other than that, they're totally different. But I made those mistakes because I pushed somebody who in my gut I knew couldn't do it. And I lied to myself. And that's what I'd like to take back. If you've reached a point where you're having to give somebody a pep talk or put them on probation for 3 months or say, this is your last chance, just get rid of them. And don't waste 3 months, because every single time I just ended up in the same spot. And then finally, once I stopped giving people chances and chances, then I ended up with the most amazing team I've ever had. But it's because I didn't waste the time of like trying to keep like, well, let me give this person one more chance or one more pep talk or like, what does your gut say? There's a great book. I think it's called, what's it called? I can't remember. And the author talks about, I met him once at an event. And the author talks about, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. Not everything in business can be a hell yes, but your people should be a hell yes. If you're a small business and you've only got a company of 6, 8, 10, 12 people like we do, like everybody who works in the office should be a hell yes. If you're like, and a great question, which I think is a Vern Harnish question, who founded EO, is, and I asked this to a friend who was struggling with an employee in February. If this person came to you as a new interview, would you rehire them? If this current employee reapplied for this position today, would you rehire them? And that's a great question, because it'll be a 5-second answer. And if it's not, a lot of times you're lying to yourself. And if it takes you 10, 15, 20 seconds to think about the answer to that question, then it's not a hell yes. And if it's not a hell yes, it should be a no. And I wasted so many months and so many years with, well, they could be great over time. And then you get the ego thing with the entrepreneur. They're not a hell yes, but maybe I can turn them into a hell yes because I'm such a great boss and I'm such a great entrepreneur. Nope. Nope. I mean, you can teach them a few things. You can teach them how to run your system. You can teach them a few tricks about business, and they can learn, via osmosis and learn how to deal with vendors and partners and stuff. But they're not a hell yes, they're a no. And if they're drowning and they're hurting your company, just get rid of them. Don't give them a second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance, because you're just going to be back again where you were the first time. Even if they cry, even if you say, listen, we got to talk about it, and they burst into tears. Again, just like we said, I really like you. The reason you don't work here because I hate you. You work here because I like you as a person, and I like what I've seen you, at least in one portion of your life, were capable of doing. But that's not what we're getting now. What we're getting now is, again, quality is not good enough. It's not okay. It's not good enough. And because I like you, I'm not going to keep putting you in a position to run a system that you're failing at. So here's an envelope. It's got some money in it. Take a couple months off. I wish you good luck. You can't work here anymore because you clearly aren't liking it. And more importantly, the system isn't liking it because you're not running this. It's almost like you have to detach yourself from it. I've known you for 10 years. They call it an egg timer. You use it with kids, right? Oh, when do I get a timeout? What does the egg timer say? I do it with Tabitha. Set the egg timer. You're in timeout 15 minutes. What does the kid say? 3 minutes later. The time yet? Nope. The time yet? No. How much time is gone? Look at the egg timer. It's out of my hands. Look at the egg timer. It's not on me anymore. It's on the egg timer. The system, there is a system for every business. Sometimes it's a sloppy system. Sometimes it's barely a system. The greatest businesses always have systems. The system, not me, the system demands more from you that you're giving. Because I like you, I'm not going to keep putting you into a situation where the system and you are in conflict with each other. So here's an envelope. I wish you good luck. I'll write you a good referral if you need one, but you can't work here anymore. And I finally got to the point where I could say that. It took me way, way, way too long and way, way, way too many second and third and fourth chances. And I wish I had all those back. Because every single time, the initial gut feeling of, I got to get rid of this person, was always correct. And there was never one time where I put somebody on probation and then they turned into a miracle worker and they got better. They just got worse. And then who else I had to blame for myself? I love working here. Please don't fire me. I want to see this through. They'd say all the right push button things. I want to see how big Underdog could be. Okay. I'll give you another chance. Let's meet up again in 3 months. 3 months to be worse. And sorry, I'll be faster. Or
no, you're good.
They'll like another common thing I've seen is the kind of emotional, like, please give me another chance. And then you start this kind of magical 3-month, 6-month probationary, you got to do better motivational period. And all they do is just go look for another job, and as soon as they find another job, they just quit, which has happened also. Oh, I got to see this through. Please don't get rid of me. I love this. A month later, they come in your office. So you're never going to believe this, but I got a job offer at Amazon. You got a job offer? Where did the job offer come from? Did it come from the interview you did as soon as we had this talk that you're not a good fit here? Because that happens too. And it's another waste of time, right? So you're putting your neck on the line, give this person a second chance. And as soon as they realize that they're not cutting it, they just go start interviewing for a job that doesn't know how not good they are at your system. And then they're still getting a paycheck, so they have the cushion. And then, it doesn't happen a lot, but I've seen that happen as well. So, yeah, there's your very long answer too. You've got to trust your gut. When you start as an entrepreneur, your gut is not fully formed. But if you've been doing it for 5, 10, 15 years and you still don't trust your gut and you keep lying to yourself, then shit's on you.
Yeah. It's
fortunate about 15 years to figure that out.
I still haven't figured it out. I was a manager of my own store at 18 years old and had to fire people, and like it just never gets easier. It's never fun. Like, especially, generally speaking, when you hire people, you hire them because you like them. So getting rid of people isn't very easy. And especially in restaurant work, I've always tried to kind of like go with the philosophy of I don't fire people, people fire themselves. Right? Yeah. Like you screwed up, and like you got to take emotion out of it. That's like the hardest part, for sure.
One of the more powerful things you can do is to try and take that egg timer concept, and we've gotten better at it. We're still not there, right? But like, there's the old joke of like the reason why the boxes on the golf scorecard are so small is so you can't fit the story in it, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's just a number, right? And if you can create those boxes for someone's job, and then you let the numbers fire them, like, hey, the numbers are the numbers. Like, the reason why the boxes are so small is because you can't fit the story, and you'll get the story. Oh, the story, and that's human nature. That's the way it goes. But I've had sleepless nights knowing I had to fire somebody. Firing people's terrible. It sucks. It's awful because they're not bad people. They're as a matter of fact, they're great people. And if they put in several years of their life for your small business, the last thing you want to do is fire them. But those sleepless nights, you're just kicking the can down the road. You're having a sleepless night because you're in conflict with what you know you need to do and doing it.
Yeah.
And if you have that sleepless night and you go to do it the next day and they talk you out of it, you've just prolonged your own agony, and you've prolonged the ultimate success of your company, because in your gut, this person isn't good enough for the system your company runs. And the sad part is they might have been good enough at one point, and they just couldn't level up. And your business leveled up.
Yeah.
And maybe you started doing double the sales. Maybe you moved and you added a second location. Maybe you started with Seattle and you added Portland. And maybe you added a few extra stores and you started with one store, and now you have 5 stores. And the person who's doing the books when you have one store, they can't handle 5 stores, and they just can't level up. And you're like, I feel bad. I don't want to fire you. I have a sleepless night. But the company demands that you be able to do 5 stores. The company demands you be able to manage 80 referees, not 10 referees. The company demands you're able to do 200 league schedules when we used to do 20 league schedules. And the company levels up, and people who are great, who try their best, they can't level up with you. And that's really, really sad. But even sadder would be to have that person keep spinning their wheels in a situation that they're doomed to fail
in. Yeah. All right. Question number 6. What makes a great entrepreneur?
There's so many different great entrepreneurs that are so, some are technicians, some are people managers, some are chemists, some are just visionaries and never actually touched a thing themselves. Some are just great motivators. Um, I think personally, if you're talking about an entrepreneur who is starting from the beginning, the magical superpower I think all entrepreneurs possess, whether or not they want to articulate it correctly. At least for me, the magical superpower has never been brains. It's never been skill. It's always been resilience. And I think you'll find that in almost every entrepreneur. There's an old expression, I think it's from Babe Ruth. It's hard to beat somebody who never gives up. And I think every great entrepreneur, for whatever reason, and sometimes, by the way, not for good reasons. And if we're being totally honest, sometimes a fear of failure can be a very powerful thing, right? Like there's different ways to get there, and sometimes they're healthy, and sometimes they're not healthy. We talk about work-life balance being healthy versus unhealthy, but the unhealthy thing is when you drive yourself to exhaustion or to craziness because you're just worried about failing, or you're worried about disappointing somebody, or disappointing your mom, or disappointing your wife, or disappointing your dad. Like you can form a great successful business just to not disappoint your family. That doesn't necessarily mean that you did it for the right reasons, but you can do it, right? Like you can be a great salesman just by being pathetic, right? It's an old joke from Jim Rohn, of like, he used to be like, I don't want this guy's kids to starve. I'm gonna buy something from him because this person is just lousy at being a salesman. Like it's like people just feel bad for you, and they're like, I've seen that happen before. Like I was like, I just feel like you're terrible at this, and maybe that's the shtick, right? Maybe that's the gig. Is like, you're so bad at this. I feel sympathy for you. You're so bad at this. I don't want your kids to starve. I'm gonna buy something from you. Like you can go about things different ways, but by far, whatever it came from, whether it was like when I was a wrestler in high school and college, and I was terrible at wrestling, and I got my ass beaten. I got my nose broken 3 times. I would go on these trips in the Midwest and Minnesota, and I'd be running in a parking lot at a Motel 6 and cutting weight at 11 o'clock at night with like semi truckers in the parking lot, like staring at me, being like, "What the hell is this guy doing?" And I'd be like listening to like Fatboy Slim on a CD player with like three layers of sweatshirts on, and like I got to a point where like literally nothing could stop me, except I sucked at wrestling. I was not very good, but I just kept getting beat over and over again. And like I literally won the last match I ever wrestled. Like you just couldn't stop me. I wasn't any good. I didn't have the skills. Skills got better over time, but I just would never quit. And I think that mentality is what all great entrepreneurs have. And an entrepreneur's bad day, they just don't see it as bad. They don't say, some salespeople, some entrepreneurs, they almost start to embrace it, right? There's something called the no checklist I talk about a lot. And they're like, I want to get to 100 no's because I know at the end of 100 no's is yes. And they almost celebrate the no's, right? Like, hey, I got rejected again. Like, not very people can do that, right? Like, most people can't keep getting kicked in the stomach and be like, this is great. But, there is a certain resiliency that you build up, and crazy stuff that's never happened, with COVID being the ultimate example. And you're like, and there were some dark times during COVID. But I think the only way we were able to get through that is because we just gotten through so many other things that I thought we could never get through. And the only way, the one of the better books I've ever read is obstacle is the way, right? The only way out is through. And, you'll see that, I think, over and over again with great coaches, great managers, great mentors, great entrepreneurs. They see they see an obstacle, they see an impediment, they see a challenge, they see a terrible day, they see a terrible week, they see a terrible event, and it just makes them better. And it sucks. I'm not saying it doesn't suck. And I've had some really sucky days at Underdog and some really sucky days at League Lab. But even the greatest referees, they have a bad game, it makes them better. But they also have to do an internal check and say, okay, here's why that day sucked. Here's why that got fucked up. Here's why that went bad. And not just be like, well, that sucks. I hope it doesn't happen again. Versus, like, I want to make sure that never happens again. That's don't sleep on that part of it. But, I think there's a certain idea of like, again, like the cliches, like don't take no for an answer. I don't know. I don't agree with that. Take no for an answer. That's a failure. That's a no on your no checklist. But are you going to ask the question again? Most people will take no for an answer and then be afraid to ask the question again because things change. I can't tell you how many times I've wanted a field and they've said no 3, 4, 5 times. And the 6th time I asked, they were like, you know what? The funniest thing. Looks like it's available. And by the way, and I didn't say, what the fuck? I've been asking about this field for a year and a half. You didn't think to call me when it opened? Like, you could take that approach. Like, what the hell? You don't remember that I've been asking about this field for the last 5 times? But it's just like, you know what? That space is available. And I can't tell you how many times with just the more pragmatic pieces of like field availability or asking somebody to come work for me, asking someone to take on more hours, saying, hey, this person's a great referee. Super funny story Nick and I talk about all the time. Like, this person is the greatest referee I've ever seen. They can only work for us 2 days a week. What are they doing the 2 nights of the week? Well, why don't you ask him? And we asked the guy. His name was Mitchell Whaley. Mitchell, what are you doing the 2 nights of the week? I'm working at Blockbuster Video. Well, how much do they pay you there? Like, they pay me like $15 an hour. Like, well, if we paid you $19 an hour, would you come work for us instead? And he's like, yeah, I'd probably do that. And like, there's just so many stories like that where it's like, don't forget to ask. And there's also so many stories about getting told no for an answer. And instead of fighting back at that moment, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, coming back 2 weeks later, coming back 2 months later, coming back 2 years later. I had my miniature golf league stolen from me by Interbay 12 years ago. And 2 months ago, they came back and said, do you want to run this? And I could have been like, no, fuck off. Fuck you. You guys are assholes. The people that are assholes aren't even there anymore. They don't even remember me. They don't know who I am. So, do you want to hold the grudge? Say, you told me no, I'm going to hate you for the rest of my life. Or you say, you told me no, is it cool if I check back in a month? They say, you can check back in a month, but it's not going to change. And guess what? It changes. It always changes because everything always changes. And the resilience of the person who can go through a bad game or a bad day and get better, but also the person who gets told no, 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 over and over and over again. Like every single time I went to Portland Parks and Rec, we don't have any spaces. We don't have any space for you. I'm like, well, did you know that I only really need space on Sundays? And they're like, oh, Sundays we might have some space, but not at the good fields. Like, I don't even need a good field. I just need a field that has a small little league time. They're like, well, yeah. Like, but any of you, if you just took the initial no, we don't have fields for you. Oh, well, I tried. Oh, well, I gave it a try. Like, this, no successful entrepreneur ever takes the first no and says, well, that's it, I guess. They just always seem to keep coming back over and over and over again, refining their product, asking follow-up questions, we had it happen 6 months ago where they literally took away a court from us in Portland. And I was like, this isn't okay. But also, we can do things that other leagues can't. And it went from like, we don't have any space for you because we have to prioritize youth. And I'm like, guess what? I've been hearing prioritize youth for 23 years. Yet I've managed to survive. So how is it possible that you always prioritize youth? And Underdog falls lowest on the list for adult for-profit. I'm not a youth nonprofit, youth profit, adult nonprofit, adult for-profit. Guess which one falls at the bottom? Me. And yet, for 23 years, I've somehow managed to survive and thrive. Partly because I have great people that I work with, but partly because the initial no, yeah, we're going to prioritize youth. Are youth playing in your gym at 10 p.m.? Well, no, they're playing in our gym from 5 to 7:30. So who has a 7:30? Well, nobody does. Okay, I'll take all your time from 7:30 to 11:30. And you feel the conversation almost shift. And the whole conversation starts with no, 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 maybe, maybe, maybe. And then it finishes with yes, also, can we do this and this and this? And I've just had so many of those conversations over the last 20 years. But a lot of people, when they get that first, a lot of people are afraid to be like, we need to have a conversation about this. Or they'll settle for emails. Well, like, you got to get in somebody's face. If you want to be successful, you got to get them on the phone. You got to meet with them in person. You got to get in their face. If you want to do things you haven't done before, you get in their face. But you can't take that first no. You can take the first no, but then are you going to come back and have the confidence and the guts to ask it again? And then when somebody takes something away from you, like they tried to do in Portland 6 months ago, can you be like, hey, I think you're making a mistake here. Well, we want to prioritize youth. Okay. Are youth playing at 9 p.m.? They should be in bed at 9 p.m. Are youth playing from 9 to 11? They tried to steal Bobby Morris from us to give it to soccer players. We had to have a big meeting about it. And guess what? We got all of our time back, and then we got more time than when they tried to steal our time. It's a constant struggle. If you have anything that's good, everyone always doesn't want competition. You want competition, because if no one's competing with you, it means either you're really lucky and you're first, or it means that nobody wants what you have. You want people to want what you have. You want people to want your field time. That means you have a good field. You want people to try and copy you, and everyone fears competition. Oh, someone else is running a dodgeball league. So again, like World According to Garp. Good. That way, if they run a crappy flag football league, a crappy kickball league, we have somewhere to dump the bad players that we don't want to play in our kickball league, so they can go say, you guys are too good for this kickball league. Go play in that kickball league. Good. Competition is good. It makes you better. But if no one's trying to compete with you, then you don't have anything of value. So you want competition. You just want to be better than your competition and have levers that you're pulling on that just make it hard to ever beat you. And maybe that's your staff, maybe that's your system, maybe that's your software, maybe that's who knows what. But so many times you get things going in the right direction, and then someone's like, yeah, you can't have that field anymore. You can't have that. And he's, oh shucks. Oh, well. Memorial Stadium. You know how many times people have tried to steal our time at Memorial Stadium over the last 20 years? Professional Frisbee, XFL, the first XFL, not the most recent XFL. OL Reign, the women's soccer team, like rugby, like it's just on and on and on. But if you have something that's good, people are going to try and steal it from you. So you might as well fight for what you believe in and fight for what you want. And fighting means even if the person says no, you say, okay, but what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And then next thing you know, they're starting to say yes. And that's, that's the way it's gone for 23 years. The first time I sat down with Portland Parks and Rec, they're like, we don't have any fields for you. And I could have been like, oh, well, darn it. And I was like, and they were talking about, yeah, there's all these fees and stuff. And by the end of the meeting, they were giving me maps of fields to go look at. And the meeting started with two head people at Portland Parks and Rec telling me we don't have any fields for you. And 45 minutes later, they were printing out fields and saying, well, if you like Unthank, check out this one and this one also. And so was that just dumb luck? Is it just coincidence that keeps happening? It's the same conversation with these people who stole our ball, who tried to take away our volleyball court 6 months ago in Portland. And the meeting started with, we don't have any time for you. And it finished with, well, actually, we have this time, and maybe you could take this other time over here too. Am I the luckiest person on the face of the earth? Or is there something more to it? And the resilience of continuing to ask follow-up questions and not settle for no's, I think, is what every great entrepreneur has.
All right. Question number 7. What role did education have in your success?
Education? I don't know. The best education is doing it. I mean, college, I think college is great, but I mean, it's mostly, I was a history major in college, so I wasn't even a business major. I ended up being an entrepreneur with 2 companies. So, go figure. I think education teaches you how to learn, but really doesn't teach you, there's no substitute for doing it. And you have to learn how to learn so that you can learn how to master your own business. There's no business, but I used to think, back in the day, I used to think that if I just kept reading every single business book, I'd become a better business person. And I think a couple of years in there, I tried. I think I tried to read every business book that was ever written, ever made, and all I did was just screw my brain up. Like you're better off, and I think a lot of people have said this. I'm not the first person. You're better off if you've got 1 or 2 business books that really inspire you. You're better off reading those 1 or 2 books 10 times over than to try and read 100 business books to make yourself better at business. I believe that wholeheartedly. The hardest part is once business becomes, entrepreneurship becomes your spot, is not adding. The hardest part is subtracting. The hardest part is simplifying. And that there's no way to simplify from education or a book. The only way to simplify is to live it and do it, and then tweak it and test it and get rapid feedback and then do it again and do it again and do it again. I run a software company. I don't want to code, but I know what we should code, and I know how to pick people who love to code. And I started trying to teach myself PHP, and I'm like, this is not going very well. So, the best education is just doing it. And I think people sometimes wait too long. Business plans. I've never written a business plan in my life. You could buy a book on how to write a business plan. You could spend 3 months reading the book on how to write a business plan, write the business plan. Business plan suck. Just go out there and do it. That's the way I see it. And you should try and learn from other people and learn from your mistakes. And definitely it's good to have mentors. And I had a business coach that really helped me out. And I've joined entrepreneur groups that really helped me out. But you're learning from their experiences. You're not learning from a book. You're not learning from a course. And every time I take in a course or a book, and I'm like, oh, the missing pieces. I need to learn more and read a book. And the magic is right around the corner. It's just, the magic is always you doing what you have to know. You need to know. You need to do, and digging into it and mastering your own stuff, and not getting disconnected from where the magic happens out on the field, out in the store. And then, also having a process by which you can get feedback and get honest feedback. So so you don't have to be in every single place, because you can't be, right? You can't be at every game. You can't be at every store. You can't work every 24 hours a day. You're going to have other people who deal with customers and deal with people and deal with problems. And And, can you trust them? But also, can you, have the confidence to be like, yeah, this is the way the system works. And this person is going to run the system about as 90% as good as I can run it. And that's good enough. I don't need to pull every lever and push every button and read every email. There's a point. I used to read every single email that came into Underdog for both cities. I drove myself fucking crazy. But I thought, that's addition. I need more business books. I need more emails. I need more information. And then once you hit a certain point, you realize that the best businesses actually simplify. You want less information. You want the important stuff to get out first. You want to hone in on one or two ideas and keep those one or two ideas as the most important ideas. Communication and diffusing conflict. Communication and diffusing conflict. Well, I went to this referee camp. We had a referee come in one time. I'd never seen it before. I think it was like 7 or 8 years ago. Nick and I were doing the audition. He came in dressed in full referee gear. He had the bean bags, he had the flag, he had the whistle on his finger, he had the hat. I'd never seen anyone do it before. He was awful. He answered every single audition question the opposite of what we would have wanted. But if you take a look at him, the enthusiasm, he was so enthusiastic, he was so excited. You were like, how fast can I get this guy in the field? This guy's amazing. He was terrible. So, because he was terrible at communication and he was terrible at diffusing conflict. You don't need 100. You realize at a certain point that ideas are a dime a dozen. And ideas can be like a drug. New ideas, new features, new leagues, new offerings, new, right? We're living a new kind of on-demand society. So you could get almost seduced by ideas and, I've got to come up with and it's like, no, like there's only one or two core ideas that are driving your business. And after a certain point, the most important thing is to keep those one or two core ideas as the one or two core ideas and not let all the other stuff and all the new stuff and, there's a new app and, there's been like 2 or 3 really big things that we've actually like utilized in the last like 10, 12 years. Asana is a fantastic product. Slack is a fantastic product. Beyond that, everything else has been a waste of time. But how much time have I spent chasing, if I just get this new book, this new app, this new productivity piece of software, this new thing, that's the missing piece. And it almost seduces you after a while. It's almost like you're chasing education, you're chasing ideas, you're chasing new books, you're chasing new programs, you're chasing new apps. How many new apps are there in the App Store every day, right? It's like how many, it's like, so, the missing piece is I need a virtual assistant. And that's going to free me up. And I've seen people with virtual assistants to book their calendars and do, it's like, what, who, what? No, there's never an app that's going to fix what you need to do because it's your business. There's never you hire the problem is we need better PR. So you hire a PR expert and they suck, which I did. We need better marketing. We've got a great product. No one knows about it. You hire a marketing person and they suck. You need better recruiting. I hired somebody who was a recruiter for like Office Depot and they were a terrible recruiter. And then I went to fire them and they said, don't fire me. And within the time that I didn't fire them, they started sleeping with one of our head trainers. They were in charge of HR and they started sleeping with one of the head referees. In the interim period from when I went to fire them the first time, and then I finally fired them the second time. And again, remember what I talked about. They don't get better in the probationary period. They get worse. So again, I'm not talking in hypothetical stuff. But that idea of like there's somebody out there who's going to solve it. There's somebody, I always call it the white lab coat thing. Like there's somebody in a white lab coat working to solve all these problems. If I just hire our referees and umpires aren't good enough. I hired a professional HR person to totally revamp our system. She had never reffed, she had never umped, she had never played in the league. She did a terrible job. She could move papers around. She could, like, if people came in, she could move them through the system vaguely. But the idea of like there's an expert out there. I hired a PR person. We need more exposure. They stunk. I hired a marketing expert. They stunk. I hired an HR expert. They stunk. I got a new app. 90% new apps besides Slack and Asana stink. Like, education can be a trap. Books can be a trap. The core goal of every leader is you've got 2 or 3 levers that you pull on to make your business run that are really important, that differentiate you. Make sure everyone keeps pulling on those levers and they don't get distracted by all the new stuff that you used to get distracted by when you for sure started, including all the books and all the experts and all the apps.
All right. Okay, last question. Question number 8. What's the most important question we did not ask, and your answer?
Oh, I'll say it just because I think it's topical. I'll say the question you ask is what's always the best thing to do for your business? This is a good segue from what we just talked about, the trap of experts and teaching and stuff. The trap of newness, you call it. What's the best thing to do to make your business better? What's the best thing to do to grow your business? What's the best thing to do to make your business better? What's the best thing to do to get your business better? I'm not great crafting this question. So we have this in software. What's the best new feature? The best new feature is a feature you've already done before that you just do in a new spot. The best thing to do for your business is almost always the thing you've already done. You might do it in a new location. You might do it in a new spot. You might do it in a slightly different way. But I am personally fascinated by the idea of how great artists and great business people are constantly doing things that look so new and amazing. And it's literally, they're just doing the same thing over and over again. Look at Pete Carroll and John Schneider. They drafted Richard Sherman in the 5th round and turned him into a Hall of Famer. Oh, that was a lucky fluke. Richard Sherman was a once in a lifetime. That'll never happen. Tariq Woolen, 5th round, Pro Bowler, leads league in interceptions. Huge long arms, tall, physical. The best thing to do is the thing you've already done before. The lady who started Annie's mac and cheese sold it to a company for like $600 million. But she only did that because she started Smart Food 10 years before it. And she sold Smart Food for $15 million. And then she went and used the same powdered cheese recipe that she got in Smart Food, the most addictive popcorn ever made. And she used that same recipe to make powdered cheese for kids, for mac and cheese, and do Annie's mac and cheese. And she blew it up and made it 10 times bigger than Smart Food was. So Smart Food is huge because I think Frito-Lay owns it. Annie's is huge. She sold Smart Food for $15 million. She sold Annie's for $600 million. But the best thing to do is the thing she'd already done before. I'm fascinated by. I'm a huge Michael Mann fan. I think one of my most favorite movies, one of my most favorite, I think one of the best gun battles of all time is Heat. I just loved Heat. I thought it was just a fantastic movie. I mean, look, it helps if you have Pacino and De Niro and Val Kilmer and a lot of the great actors. Great movie, but it's a fantastic movie. It's a little bit dated. It's a little slow sometimes. A big sweeping epic, a la like Miami Vice, like of the big crime dramas. They don't really make those anymore. And I was just fascinated by the gun battle in the bank robbery scene, and how good it was. And then I did a bunch of research on it, and he actually had done a TV show called LA Takedown. And LA Takedown was just Heat with shittier actors. And they didn't like the pilot, so they just turned it into a movie. But he is, in some parts, it's almost a shot-for-shot remake of Heat and the bank robbery scene. So Michael Mann has 3 days to do the bank robbery scene and block off all of downtown LA. He doesn't have 3 months to do it. He doesn't have 3 weeks to do it. He has 3 days to do it. They're like, we'll give you 3 days to block off all of downtown LA to shoot this scene. It sure helps to shoot that scene if you've already shot that scene when you did LA Takedown. And if you go on YouTube and Google LA Takedown Heat, you'll see people who have done videos of like the scene in the diner, which is the first scene that De Niro and Pacino were ever in the same movie together. And it's almost a word for word ripoff, but he's ripping off himself because he'd already done it before. And that's just again, it's hard to, you get seduced by newness and new ideas and new books and new experts and new features and new apps. The best thing to do is not, you should try new stuff. You shouldn't get stodgy and say, that's new, I'm scared. But almost in every case, the best thing to do is just a slight reiteration of the thing you've already done and you know you're good at, and you know it's been successful, like Annie's powdered cheese. And you see that over and over again with fantastic entrepreneurs and business people. They look like they're coming out of nowhere. They look like they're an overnight sensation, and there's no such thing as an overnight sensation. Heat looks like it's an amazing movie out of nowhere. He shot the movie twice. The first time it was called LA Takedown, and then he did it again with better actors, and it was called Heat. But it was just based on a book he wrote about a bank robber from the 1950s. So he's just constantly just ripping off himself. He wrote a book. He turned the book into LA Takedown. He turned LA Takedown into Heat. And then guess what? This year he came out with Heat 2. And there'll probably be a movie called Heat 2. And maybe Pacino and De Niro will be in it. So I think the question is, what's the best thing to do for your long-term success? And the answer is, the best thing to do is the thing you've already done before. A lot of people don't have that confidence to say, I already did this. It was called LA Takedown. I already did this. It was called Smart Food. I already did this. And a lot of people don't have that confidence, but that's always the best thing to do. The thing you're good at, the thing that's true to who you are, the thing that you love, the thing you've already done and you have experience with, and the thing you know already works. That's always the best thing to do, is the thing you've already done before. You can do it in a new spot, you can do it in a new way, you do it in a new iteration, but ultimately you're just doing, and you see this all over and over again, especially for us lately. One of our most powerful new features for our software platform is a really simple storytelling idea called the player of the game photo. But the player game photo is just taking the team photo, which is something that's been really successful for us for 20 years. And I was like, if we already have a setup for our software company, League Lab, that takes team photos, why don't we just use the same feature for team photos to take individual photos and call them player of the game photos? And we just rolled it out a month ago, and it's starting to work, and it's working better than I even expected it would work. But it's working because it's something we've already done before. And that's, I think, what I would say.
Nice. Well, thank you for your time this evening. I will have a lot of editing to do. I will definitely send you the final product.
Yeah.
I very much appreciate it. Lots of really good insights. It's cool for me to get to know a little bit more about, your story and just how Underdog and League Lab have gotten to where they are, and just the insights from you have been really, really cool. So I appreciate it very much.
Yeah. Sorry. As you can tell, I get excited and I kind of,
Hey, that's all right.
As Delaney can attest to, I get excited and I kind of start telling stories. If you synthesize it down to like 15 minutes and you want me to like reshoot it like really tight, or like, without the background, or, if you want to reshoot it in person or something, let me know and I'll.
Okay, I appreciate it. I imagine I got the next couple of days off, so I imagine I'll be able to hopefully figure out how to get this down a little bit. It was funny because I was talking to Delaney today and I was like, this is either going to go one of two ways. It's either going to be like Shawn has his answers thought out already, it's going to be short and sweet, or it's going to take 2.5 hours. And she was like, yep, probably 2.5. I'm like, that's fair.
Yeah.
So we
hopefully there's enough good, if you root through it, hopefully there's enough good 2 or 3 minute segments where you can clip them together. But if it's fucked, let me know. Like you said, if you got that transcript and that these are the
good points,
the blocks, and you just want me to like reshoot them, or
okay,
do them not on Zoom, but do them. I've got a video camera and stuff. If you want me to do them in let me know. I'd be happy to do it.
Well, I appreciate it again. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to work on this over the next couple of days. So I think it's due at the end of the month here sometime. Actually, it's due on the last day of class, which is the 1st. So I've got a couple of weeks to get the editing done. So I will definitely keep you posted on it. And again, yeah, just thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, no sweat. Let me, if I can help, let me know.
Stuff. Yeah. Well, awesome. Good talking with you. We should get out on the golf course sometime soon.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, again, thank you. I'm gonna go hang out with Delaney and get some dinner. So all right, Shawn. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you again.
All right.